And hey, it's a Friday. Sorry for missing Wednesday's show. I had a bit of a summer cold come up and feeling much better today. And got to say, it's my partner's birthday. So a good day all around for me. Hopefully, your Friday is going well for yourself. But we're ready to chop it up here on the Woodshed. See, we got some people in the chat already, including my friend Anand of the Anand Sports Show. Good to see you, buddy. Hopefully the cricket was good the other day on Tuesday. Hopefully that was enjoyable for you. But it's an interesting day today. Obviously, we had the Western Hockey League draft take place last night, and there were some interesting comments made to one of my early mentors who kind of took me under her wing, and Cami Kepke, and I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get into the Minor Sports Monday here on the show. We've had the Dogs get another minor player draft, or someone out of their program drafted and signed to a professional contract. And hey, we still got more playoffs going on after we had to mourn the chances of the Calgary Flames drafting first overall. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. But of course, we're in the second round of the playoffs in what has been one of the best NHL playoffs in my recent memory. And maybe that's just because the teams that I personally like are winning, but it's also kind of feels like merit-based victories for every team thus far. Obviously, we talked about the first couple of games on the show on Monday, so let's talk about everything that's happened since. And we're going to have a longer list because, as I said, missed Wednesday. Feeling way better. The day off was something I certainly needed. And maybe it also gave me some time to reflect on the draft and maybe make some more tinfoil hats. But anyways, let's talk about the first game of round two that happened since our show on Monday. And of course, that was the Flyers and Hurricanes game number 2. And it was the Hurricanes coming ahead 3-2 and taking a 2-0 series lead in that series, because it is kind of interesting that it did go to overtime, a game that the Flyers were ahead 2-0 in. Of course, goals coming from Jamie Drysdale, another one of those young Flyers who, off a neutral zone faceoff, gets in and just hard on the puck as it comes to the point, firing it by the goaltender for Carolina, Freddie Anderson. And I didn't think it was going to be Freddie Anderson's crease for the playoffs. I thought that the feel-good story in Brandon Bussi would be the man between the pipes. But yeah, they're going to steady Freddie for the rest of for this run, as they did in the first round, and I can't argue with the results. Of course, Drysdale and Sean Couturier getting their goals early on in the first. In fact, only 30 seconds apart, but that would be the only offense this young Flyers team could muster, which allows the Hurricanes to just stick around. And a guy that I thought would have found the score sheet more often gets his first goal of the playoffs, a playoff marker for Nikolai Ehlers. I know I got some Jets friends in one of my group chats that were just wondering when Ehlers would show up. And it was a nice shot off the half boards. One that you would want Dan Vladar to have if you're a Flyers fan. But beautiful shot, and that was what Ehlers did, that one-timer. Up high. Get it elevated, get it over the shoulder of Darth Vladar. Beautiful goal. And then Seth Jarvis as well, another guy you would have expected to have more of an offensive impact. But hey, gets it done with the snapshot off the zone entry. A little drop pass to get it back to him. And he fires it home. I think, was it game 1 that they had the traveling group of Jarvis fans do their storm horn celebration, get the fans all pumped up. I can't remember if it was game 1 or game 2, but it was really cool. Or it was a game 3. No, it would have had to be one of the first two games of the series because they're at home in those games. But regardless, Seth Jarvis, first goal of this playoffs, assist to Ehlers and Stahl. So Ehlers gets his third point of the playoffs there at even strength. And then it's the Calgary native, if my brain's not absolutely busted, it is. I always forget if Taylor Hall's Calgarian for some reason. But Taylor Hall, the veteran on this Hurricanes team, ends it in overtime. Blake and Walker with the assists. And it was interesting if you watch on the game center where they have all of the dots that represent the players. Half the team goes to celebrate with Taylor Hall. The other half goes to Frederik Andersen, as Freddie did have to be fairly busy in this one. Stops 34 of 36 shots in the win. And not to say that Dan Vladar was necessarily bad, because as I said, it's a one-timer on a power play. You don't necessarily expect him to stop that one. He stops 39 of 42. And the thing that I always point to is an indicator of dominance and an ability to control the game. Carolina was 60% in the face-off dot. Like, I understand they're the veteran team. They are one of the best teams in the NHL by record in the regular season. If you're dominating 60 to 40% in that face-off dot, you are obviously having that 20-point differential, whether that's winning more draws in your own zone, denying offensive opportunities for this young Flyers team, or whether that's starting the play with the puck if you're winning an offensive zone draw. It's so important. It's the little things that matter in this series. And then it was the start of the series between the Ducks and Vegas. I love that in the picture on NHL.com with the game sheet is Rasmus Andersson right on the front page there. I do miss Rasmus a little bit, as he finally gets on the score sheet, finally gets on the stat sheet, and it happened in the second period. The first goal of the game happening 3 minutes in. A point shot from, of all people, Mitch Marner gets tipped on route, finds its way through Lucas Dostal, as it was Howden racing to the front of that and Marner getting that slap pass through. And Rasmus Andersson gets the secondary assist for getting the zone entry there on that play. And then it's Mikael Granlund, who has been very, very good for the Ducks. Gets the Ducks on the board, evens it up, assist to Jackson Lacombe. And this is a crazy number. Jackson Lacombe has 9 assists in the playoffs. At least he did during this first game. Like, how this guy was left off the American gold medal winning roster is kind of shocking. Well, he was on the roster but never played. And maybe this is his coming out. He's angry at not being on the ice at the Olympics. First, I'm going to shut down Connor McDavid. Now I'm going to try and push back past one of the best teams in modern hockey since their introduction to the league. But it would not be on this day, as Ivan Barbashev, a couple minutes later, they force a turnover in the offensive zone, and then it's 4 guys right in front of the net. Barbashev sneaks to the back post, gets his third of the series, or of the playoffs rather, assist to Dorofeyev, and Mitch Marner puts the icing on the cake, empty netter from his own zone. Knights up 1-0 in that series. But let's head to Tuesday. We didn't talk playoffs when we looked at the draft show. Of course, only the one game on Tuesday after the draft selection. And it was another Colorado Avalanche victory. Another 3-goal margin of victory. Started off, Martin Necas gets his first of the playoffs. Assist to Nate McKinnon, just beautiful passing play to get out of the zone. And when that big Nate McKinnon train starts moving, there's not many players in the NHL that are going to stop him. Like, he is one of the best at once he is going of not stopping. He is a straight ahead big dude. Hard to stop. Assist also to Kulak. And then Krill the Thrill gets his third of the playoffs right off the face-off after that goal. Kind of a turnover along the boards. or rather win the faceoff, couldn't get it back, could Colorado, from along the boards. Gets into Kirill, and bada bing, bada boom, we're level at 1. But wouldn't stay that for much longer. 8 minutes, 24 seconds into the period. Puck goes back to the line to Cale Makar, and the Avs just work it down, and sitting right in front of goal is Gabe Landeskog, assist to McKinnon and Nakis. And we go out of the first with a Colorado 2-1 lead. And one of the best trade deadline acquisitions for this playoff runs has been Nicholas Waugh. Of course, thought that he might have been the only move the Avs make until the last second trade deal to acquire Nazem Kadri. Bumps him down the lineup a little bit for the Avs, but when you have 3 centers that are very good at what they do, including Kadri and Nicholas Waugh, you're in a good place. Nicholas Waugh gets his 3rd goal of the playoffs after a good play in the neutral zone, just quick transition, gets it to Waugh, and Waugh beats Wallstedt pretty clean. 3rd goal of the playoffs, assist to Ross Colton and Brock Nelson. Then Nathan McKinnon early, or about halfway through the 3rd, it's a power play goal once again. Little bit of a give and go with Nazem Kadri and Gabe Landeskog. But boy, that pass to Nate from Kadri, absolutely brilliant. From the hash marks to the top of the circles, almost that Ovechkin spot where you just find the soft spot in coverage, and good pass from Kadri to put it right on the blade. Marcus Johansson gets it closer for the Wild, but Val Nichushkin puts the empty netter. 5-2 your final score. Colorado winning both of their games at home to hold court, heading back to Aiden, Minnesota. Of course, some of my viewership is not young enough to know who Little Yachty was and get that reference. But then it's time for game 1 of the Eastern second round between the Sabres and the Canadiens de Montreal. And I think the Canadiens were accounting for more physicality, as they were used to the body banging style that Tampa Bay has employed this year. And then they go into Buffalo, which they're still physical, but they're a lot faster. And speaking of fast, it's Josh Doan, son of Shane, starting to build this program. But it was the work of Zach Benson along the boards, and then a great backhand pass over to Doan, and he makes no mistake, tucks it past Jakub Dobeš. And then it's the power play. Ryan McLeod gets his first of the playoffs, and once again, it's Benson and Doan doing yeoman's work. And then it just comes back to the back door. Great little feed. And Ryan McLeod makes no mistake on the one-timer. Roofs it over Jakub Dobeš. 2-0 for the Sabres. But before the period was over, Nick Suzuki starting to get online. Power play goal assist to Juraj Slafkovsky. Slafkovsky only his first assist of the playoffs, and he was in a 7-game series. Finds Suzuki on the back door. The other assist goes to Demidov. 2-1. And then Jordan Greenway. Not a guy I expect to necessarily see on the score sheet, but it takes a unlucky bounce. The Habs unable to enter the zone, and just quick turnover play, and Greenway makes no mistake. Dobeš screened. He gets his first of the playoffs, and Samuelsson his first assist. And then Bowen Byram. Remember that he's still around. He gets his 4th goal of the playoffs. Habs unable to clear, and Bowen Byram walks right down Main Street and risks that one past Dobeš. And Kirby Dach makes it a game after the Sabres turn it over in neutral. Bolduc just gets it forward, and Dach tucks home his own rebound. Thought there was still time for a Habs comeback, but they couldn't put anything else past the Sabres. Really interesting game, really interesting series. And great goaltending there from Alex Lyon. As we said, it was an interesting choice. Who do you go with on a game-by-game basis for the Sabres? Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Lyon have both been very good. Give the reins to Lyon here. And he puts up a 929 to deny the Canadiens in game number 1. And that takes us back to Vegas. And the Ducks, when the lights are shining bright, the Ducks fly together. And it was a lot of their young guys in this one. Beckett, Seneca. Good pressure on the D, forcing the turnover down low. And Beckett, Seneca knows where goal scorers got to be. Right at the top of the blue paint. Puts it past Carter Hart. Then it's Leo Carlsson. Again, another one of these young Ducks. The people that said just aren't ready. He gets the pass all the way across after he muffed the first attempt, but tucks it past Carter Hart on a little bit of a broken play. But speaking of the veterans on this team, Chris Kreider and Troy Terry pick up the assists. And then it's just the good hard work on the empty net goal by Harkins. He was up on the forecheck, able to stop, picks up the pill, and gets it into the unattended Vegas net. Super early pull of the goaltender for the Vegas Golden Knights, because this goal was with almost 3.5 minutes left in the third period. And then Mark Stone stops Dostal's shutout bid with only 6 seconds remaining, as the Ducks just couldn't clear the zone. The power play goal and snips the shutout streak there. But you don't care really about the shutout. You care about wins and losses in the playoffs. And the Ducks even up that series against Vegas as they fly back home to California to take on the Knights. And then only one game last night, and that's the Hurricanes taking their 3-game lead in this one. Again, the Flyers just getting outpowered in this series. And it's the ageless wonder who starts it off, Jordan Staal. He gets the power play marker to start it all off for Carolina. Good hard work by the Canes, just not allowing the shorthanded unit to get out for the Flyers. Does kind of bounce on Vladar off the end boards. But good job for the last of the Staal brothers remaining. An assist to Svechnikov and the former Flyer, Shane Gosper. And again, just a vet doing what this team needs, gets the power play marker. In the second period, the Flyers would level or even it up with Trevor Zegras, the former Duck, as it was the man advantage on the delayed penalty, but Zegras tucks it home from a pretty egregious angle. They don't want to call it bad angle shots anymore. They want you to say sharp angle. Let's be honest. Freddie shouldn't let a goal in from that area. But it was a A++ shot from Zegras. Andre and Porter Martone get the assists. But the Jalen Chatfield shorthanded goal at the second half of the period, just kind of the heartbreaker. Cross ice pass and barely tucks it past Dan Vladar as he stretches to try and get to that one. But Chatfield's first of the playoffs comes there, and Staal and Martinook get the assists. Then putting this one to bed, it was the Andrei Svechnikov, his first goal of the playoffs. A guy that you thought would probably have a few to get to the point where the Canes are. That 4-on-3 power play, just working that Flyers forward. Cross ice pass, and Svechnikov isn't going to miss many open shots like that on Dan Vladar. And the Nikolai Ehlers, just a face-off win in deep. Long pass, gets by everyone. Ehlers on the breakaway. He gets his second of the series. Assist to Martinook and I was going to call him Kamal Miller, but Miller on the back end. And suddenly the Flyers, from flying high to being on the series point, you have to wonder what is going to come for the Flyers. Is it going to be Sam Ersson who comes in game 4? The 6'3 Falun, Sweden native, is he just forced in? Not that I think Vladar has been bad. I don't think he's had a snowball's chance in the downstairs place to get to a lot of these, but maybe it just has to come as that knuckleball, that change of pace. Who knows? Ersson hasn't seen a lot of playing time. Vladar really has been the starter, and obviously as Flames fans, we know Dan Vladar is a heck of a goalie when he's on his game. But you have to just wonder, is it time to shuffle things around to try and get one game closer? I just have to... That is the final game that we haven't gone through of this first round. Of course, 2 games going forward every day now, as we've got the Canadians trying to even up their series to bring it back at a 1-1 tie coming north of the border. A couple players to watch. I would love to see Juraj Slafkovsky continue his push. And for the Sabres, I have to think Tage Thompson might be a little bit more of a weapon in this one. Will Dobesh be able to hold on? Because it has been Alex Lyon with the 4 wins for the Sabres on the other side. And then, of course, we head to Anaheim. Can the young, plucky Ducks continue to push as hard as they can against these Vegas Golden Knights? Show that the Pacific Division, hey, maybe it wasn't a pillow fight. Maybe it was closer than we all thought. Might have been the worst division in the NHL, but maybe they're closer to each other. But hey, it might be running into a buzzsaw, because they might be coming in against a well-rested Avalanche team. Of course, the Avs and the Hurricanes, the 2 undefeated teams, both going on Saturday. Will the Flyers be able to prevent the sweep? Look at the statistical leaders in terms of skaters and goaltenders. When we look at points, it is Quinn Hughes leading the way, tied with Kirill Kaprizov. Both of them with 11 points. And then it is Leon Draisaitl, a guy who has not played a single game in round 2. And hey, I have a sneaking suspicion won't play any games in round 2, 3, or the Stanley Cup Finals. Just a hunch. But he's still up there, tied for 3rd in points with Nathan McKinnon and Jackson Lacombe, and Boldy and Eichel also up there. It's kind of crazy how many points a lot of these Wild players have. And then we want to look even more at that points. A lot of guys tied at 9, including Matt Duchene, Taylor Hall, Mitch Marner, Troy Terry, and Leo Carlson. But it really has kind of been, there's this explosion of young guys entering this playoff seed. Obviously, you have the veterans, the Jack Eichels, the Quinn Hugheses of the worlds, the Kirill Kaprizov, as I said, leading the way. But like, as much as I call Troy Terry a veteran, dude's only 28. Leo Carlson being up there, Leo Carlson, Jackson Lacombe. There's guys that I don't think a lot of people would have figured would be this high up the list at this point in their careers. Like, and as much as we're gonna dunk on Evan Bouchard, as he does not get any nominations for NHL awards, it really is interesting to look at how the NHL is sort of changing. Like, obviously, we're not going to see a lot of Flyers up in this list. And if Utah had made it further, you'd probably see a few more youthful players. But we are starting to see that next generation, that next man up, beginning to show. Guys like Peyton Krebs, Bowen Byram both have 6 points. Um, I'd love to see some more of the Flyers get some more points. But it is showing that there is youth coming that is pushing on these guys to assist them in producing and producing points of their own. Like, guys, I think eventually you're going to see Porter Martone as a very dangerous player in the NHL. And dude's only 19. Um, you have to wonder. Obviously, Matvei Michkov has not been much of a factor at all in the playoffs with only 1 point. Dude's also only 21. Um, we will see where it goes. And hey, if the Ducks continue, we're going to see more of this youth pushing through. And hey, they're putting a, I wouldn't say belt to behind on the Vegas Golden Knights, but it's been a good series and it's been showing that youth and blissful ignorance can sometimes be a benefit. And we have started to see some of the NHL awards nominees come out. Let's talk about a few of these finalists as we talk about we'll start with the Norris Trophy because we did just talk about that. Some people feeling like there is a snub on this list, and maybe that's just people from the northern part of this province being marked as homers. Rasmus Dahlin, Cale Makar, and Zach Werenski named as the three finalists. And I have to think you've given it to Cale a few times. And you know what? Like, as much as we want to say the awards are just going to the best players, it isn't always that way. Of course, this is the best defenseman. You have to think maybe it will go to Rasmus Dahlin, who has had his fair share of struggles and is now leading Buffalo back to one of its best series in recent memory. Or will it be Zach Werenski, who, while the Blue Jackets did not make the playoffs, they did much better than anyone would have thought that anyone possibly could have. And you know what? I think there is probably an argument for both of them. I think if you were asking me to put money down, despite betting being awful and immoral, I think Rasmus Dahlin would be the person that I would choose. Like, this is a club that has struggled for so long. And played 77 games, which is sixth in the league and a career high. 13 even strength goals and 52 even strength points. I'd like to see Dahlin win it. I think he's got some pretty long odds. But I also think the voters have maybe a little bit of fatigue with Cale Makar. You don't see these awards generally go to the same guy year after year, just because they want to recognize other people. So I wonder if one of the other guys has a shot to defeat the Calgarian. Then let's look at the Hart Trophy, which, of course, is the most valuable to his team, voted by the hockey writers. Your finalists being Nikita Kucherov, Nathan MacKinnon, and Connor McDavid. Interesting to see two guys from the West, as there is obviously that East Coast bias that everyone out West talks about. But and obviously these things are voted on before the playoffs, so you're not going to put in the playoff efforts of both Nikita Kucherov and Connor McDavid not getting their teams past the first round. But I think Nathan MacKinnon just has been a dominant force in that Colorado team. Like, they have been regarded as the top team in the league all year. I think you have to go Nate MacKinnon here on this one. Of course, Connor McDavid has the name recognition, so some of the guys who don't get to watch a lot of Western games that are voting from the Eastern media may just say, oh, Connor McDavid's really good, I'm going to vote for him. But I think people, regardless, recognize what a force Nathan MacKinnon has been guiding. So you have to think his name probably pretty high up the list. And today we also had the Selke Trophy nominations. Of course, the Selke is the forward voted to best excel in the defensive aspects of the game, a award that I think Michael Backlund should have won at least once in his career. Your nominations are Anthony Cirelli, Brock Nelson, and Nick Suzuki. Um, I know that probably my former employer wants me to say Nick Suzuki wins this number one with a bullet. Um, but I don't necessarily think that will be the case. I think it will probably be Anthony Cirelli who actually wins this award. I think with Brock Nelson and the Avs not necessarily being known as a shutdown team, but having Brock Nelson be their shutdown specialist, I think that might play in. I also think this one voted by the PHWA. Also, there are people that are on that voting list that are going to feel, can't just give everything to Colorado, can we? So I think it will be Cirelli winning that one. We also had the Calder, of course, Rookie of the Year. And I think this one's tight. Ivan Demidov, of course. Again, you have that, do the writers finally start realizing that older players shouldn't win the Calder argument that we've seen year after year. So I think it's probably a coin flip between the defensive excellence that you've seen early on in a career, which you don't often see. You often think of defensemen needing that time to mature. Between Schaefer and Beckett Seneca, the right wing for the Anaheim Ducks. I'd love to see Beckett Seneca win this. The number 2 pick winning the Rookie of the Year over the number 1 pick. I just like that storyline. And I think without Beckett Seneca, this is a much different Ducks squad. I don't think they make the playoffs without the production that you've seen from Beckett. And hey, I think he is deserving of this trophy. Of course, I don't get to watch a lot of Matthew Schaefer games. I've seen the clips. I also think that it'll be interesting. But there's always that chance that the writers just say, no, most points, Demidov. Sure. I wouldn't be upset with it if Demidov wins, but I also am kind of a little tired of these rookies that come over from the KHL and just dominate just because they've been playing against pros a little bit or against men a little bit longer. Of course, Demidov still comes over young, but I just got that feeling that this might be the year that my feelings are mirrored by the writers. Bill Masterson Memorial Trophy, of course, is also selected by the Pro Hockey Writers Association to the player that best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. Gabe Landeskog, Jonathan Taves, and Rasmus Dahlin, the 3 nominations. I think you just have to give this one to Dahlin, especially if he doesn't win the top defenseman. Like, he's been on a squad that has struggled mightily. He's talked about how that's affected his mental health. I think it should go to Dahlin. Like, Gabe Landeskog, I think, also has huge potential to win this award. Obviously, his injury history is well known. I just have a hard time thinking Jonathan Taves wins this one. I think, is he deserving to be a finalist? Definitely. Without a doubt. But I think it needs to go to Dahlin or Landeskog. Jack Adams is John Cooper. The one I didn't expect to see in this one was Dan Muse. Of course, you saw the pictures of him in the lineup. Or the pictures of him compared to Ryan Huska. I think that was one of my favorite moments of the year when it was are they brothers or roommates or whatever? Who's who? And then Lindy Ruff, of course, the coach that leads the Sabres back to the promised land of the playoffs. I think it has to be Lindy. Like, I think, full shout, John Cooper. It's been years of excellence down in Tampa Bay. And Dan Muse taking a team that most people did not think was going to be a playoff team and gets them the most out of a lot of guys not named and a lot out of a team that missed Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin for vast swaths of the season. So we'll have to see. But Lindy Ruff obviously gets rid of the decade of missing the playoffs for the Sabres. I think he has to be recognized for his skills leading the way there. I think there's an obvious, and then we'll talk about the Lady Byng. Of course, that's the sportsmanlike player of the year. Give me a second. I'm just going to take a sip of my beverage here. Because my throat not doing so hot after, as I said, a bit of a summer cold. With all respect to Cole Caulfield and Jake Sanderson, there is one guy who has been one of the classiest men in the NHL for a long time in a team that I felt didn't have a lot of class without him. That's Anze Kopitar. I've talked to former Calgary Flame, Rob Nagier, about Anze and his leadership. Obviously, Rob Nagier winning his one and only Stanley Cup with the LA Kings with Anze, and nothing but the most glowing reviews for Anze. So for him to finish his NHL career being recognized with the Lady Byng, I think is the perfect bookend to this story. Anze obviously only playing 67 games this year, lower in points than the other two. But less penalties, has been around forever. I think you give him his fourth. And yes, he'd win back-to-back years, but I think that's a perfect way to see him end his career. Last two awards, and then we'll go on our 5-minute break before we get all fired up, get our tinfoil hats ready. Ilya Sorokin, Jeremy Swayman, and Andrei Vasilevsky, your three finalists. Sorokin, I think, has had a great year and was worked to death on that Islanders squad. But again, did not make the playoffs. Only had a 906. Jeremy Swayman, obviously, coming out of that tandem where a lot of people were questioning, oh, is he the one you should have gone with? Is proving all the doubters wrong. 31-18-4 record on the season. Goals against average a little bit inflated from where he'd want to be, but a good save percentage. Only 2 shutouts on the year. I think the 7 shutouts are why Ilya Sorokin was on this list, by the way. But I think the winner has to go to Andrei Vasilevsky. As I said, this is a regular season award. If this were a playoff nomination, I think you probably would have not seen Vasilevsky on this list. But Vasi goes 39-15-4 with a 231, 912 save percentage. 2 shutouts on the year. Well, yes, Sorokin did leave in high danger saves and high danger save percentage. I just don't think you can give a guy that was only 5 games above 500 the best goaltender of the year award. Especially when you have the best rookie defenseman in the league in front of him. Like, yes, he was good. Probably great. But I don't think he can win the award with his record. I think it's Vasilevsky's year yet again. But I could be wrong. Like, I could not be seeing what the writers vote on. And then, of course, we go to the Ted Lindsay, which is the most outstanding player in the NHL as voted by members of the NHLPA. Really weird to see Macklin Celebrini on this list this early in his career. Of course, was kind of the straw that stirred the Sharks' drink, and hey, he'll be getting some help in that regard at the NHL entry draft. Nikita Kucherov and Connor McDavid, the other nominations. I think there's a good chance Nikita Kucherov walks away with this award. But also very hard to see how NHL players pick, because not a lot of the Eastern players don't see a lot of the Western players. Such is life. I would be shocked if Macklin walked away with this. But him making the finals in just his second year as an NHLer really shows what the players think about this young man. But yeah, Kucherov and McDavid are perennial finalists in this. But yeah, the fact that Macklin's celebrating his second year is fourth in the NHL and set a Sharks franchise record with 115 points. Didn't hit the 50 goal mark, but 115, not bad for a 19-year-old. So I have to wonder if they say, kid, like, this is a explosion for you. You are going to be on this many more years, but I have to think Cooch is probably one of the selections. I think there's enough players who don't like Connor McDavid to maybe not vote for him for this award. But who knows? Of course, that is all of the nominations we have at this point. I'll probably talk a few more on Monday as they come out over the weekend. But that's my take on the NHL awards and the first round of the playoffs, folks. It is time to pull out your tinfoil hats. We will talk about if this NHL entry draft lottery was rigged when we return here on the Woodshed Sports Report. I'm your host, Conrad Wood.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you, for you, for you, for you, for you, won't you let the light shine through? In the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you, for you, for you, for you, for you, for
Welcome back to the Woodshed Sports Report. And that's not what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. But before we go into our main topic, I do just want to take some time to shout out Cami Kepke. Cami, obviously, for those of us who are in Calgary, know what an incredible sports reporter Cami has been with Global, now with the Western Hockey League, leading their league produced content. And she was hosting the analyst table at the Western League's draft. And after a third round selection, went to the scouting staff of the Vancouver Giants, and Terry Bonner was the one who she was talking to. And Terry made some, what I view as not great comments to Cami. What a beautiful lady, sort of stuff. And I think if you walked into a bar around Calgary, you would see people kicked out for much lesser statements towards someone, let alone having it on air on Victory Plus. So my thoughts are with Cami, who is, as I said, one of the best to represent this city and represent the Western League. Deserves much better than that. The fact that there hasn't been a statement from the Dub or from the Vancouver Giants about this comment is why a lot of women don't feel comfortable coming to these games. So I don't know if that's a hot take to lead off Fire It Up Friday, but we'll get into this one. As tinfoil hats on, folks. Was the NHL draft lottery rigged? Of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs win the first overall selection. The San Jose Sharks win the second. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole on my phone after this went down. Kind of looking up ways that a live draw could be rigged. Of course, the ping pong balls in that paddled and air operated randomizer using numeric codes instead of just having each team's picture on lottery balls a certain number allows for more randomization and allows for some of these claims to feel a little bit more hollow. But speaking of hollow, there's ways you can tamper with ping pong balls. Obviously, they came in a sealed briefcase. Each appeared to be about the same size, but it's really hard to know if they really were all the same size. It's kind of that were the lottery balls corked argument that you'll hear me and a lot of other people who are crying foul of the NHL talking today. Because historically, in the same way that these balls were presented to the viewing audience, they come in a sealed package and then they're put directly in the machine. And hey, it's a machine, it can't have bias. Oh, there's plenty of ways you can induce bias with it. Fortunately, we've gone the way of the dodo in selecting random envelopes because there's much easier ways to alter that. But the primary way that you could alter this spinning, juggling, massive ping pong balls is the ones that go higher. They could be a lighter ping pong ball. I haven't gone down, and I'm not going to, but I'm sure somebody, if they had all the time in the world and wanted to investigate the pro-Toronto bias of the NHL, you could look and see how many of the balls came up into that little conical chute that led into the pipe. You could see if the balls that came up were in that tube a little bit more often, leading to the fact that they were lighter. Because that's something that I've seen clamoring for, is even when there are ping pong balls that in theory should be all the same, there should be a scale there. Prove to me that all those ping pong balls are uniform in weight. Because you could have a thicker shell on one, put that on a number that is a team you don't want, say Calgary, Vancouver, Western Canadian teams that are smaller markets, Winnipeg, who we always hear has some of the lowest attendance. Make those balls that have higher likelihood odds of Winnipeg shooting up make them fall down deeper, or we didn't like how Florida was in this running. Let's make sure their combinations are heavier and therefore less likely, not impossible, but less likely to be picked. Um, Obviously, we don't know how independent this auditing firm is. We don't know what their relationship to the NHL is, or at least I don't as a fan. Like, because is that the NHL's usual lawyer? Is that not somebody you could go to if it is the usual lawyer and say, hey, I really don't want the Calgary Flames to get this first overall. How can we do that even with you presenting me the lottery balls? Oh, we can put them weighted in before the case. And when we unseal it, it'll all look the same, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we can move the needle. In theory, this would leave a paper trail, yada yada. Let me have my tinfoil hat on, be an angry Flames fan. However, the NHL did address one of my main concerns, which is number one, even when they went to commercial, there was still the picture-in-picture, the secondary screen that showed we aren't altering the balls at all. We are certainly adding in as many advertisements as we can to make this production cost a little bit less. But it allowed the fans to independently see, oh, we aren't fiddling with the balls in between selections. You've eliminated one negative for the fans, so thumbs up on that. But we're still going to point out that, hey, it's pretty odd that there's all these rumors of the last or the last number one leaving Toronto, and now they're gonna get another superstar. Really convenient that the biggest Canadian market and therefore biggest market that cares about this sport is getting a first overall draft pick. Like, there's gonna be some skepticism on that. And then what's the one of the other big stories from the NHL? Oh, that Macklin Celebrini, in just his second year, he's already shattering long-held NHL records held by guys like Joe Thornton. Let's give him another guy. Let's boost those numbers up. That's gonna make people like me turn our heads. And I apologize if you heard that. Bumped into a piece of ceramic on my floor. Tokay number one, glad to see a friend. One of my friends from back when I hosted Game Over Calgary. Glad to see you in chat. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday here on Fire It Up Friday on the Woodshed Sports Report. I think people are just kind of shaking their heads and looking at this draft and being like, yeah, I know it was only a 25% chance the Canucks would stay at number two. And for us in Calgary land, the second most likely outcome was the Flames moving down to 6 because we couldn't stop winning at home when it didn't matter at the end of the season. Thanks, Blake Coleman and Michael Backlund and Morgan Frost. Thanks, guys. But yeah, it's really kind of seems a little interesting that when a generational talent comes up and Toronto is struggling, that Toronto wins the draft lottery. And of course, there's very little credence because, hey, it was independent auditor, published odds, published numbers, and controlled procedures. But sports fandom isn't rational. If it were rational, I would not be a Flames fan. I don't think many of us would be. But at where we're at in this point in time, like, that doesn't really matter. Tokay in chat on YouTube saying, I'm gonna cry when McKenna puts on the Leaf jersey. It's gonna hurt me a little bit on the inside too. Of course, I'm seeing all the pictures of him as a kid wearing the Flames jersey, him wanting to be a member of the Sea of Red. But that's not the future we're living in. And hey, I've heard a lot of Vancouverites being pretty sour that they don't get to see him putting on that ugly whale jersey. But all terms, it is possible, but extremely unlikely that the NHL could or had rigged this draw. Tokay saying Conroy trade up. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, so just hold that thought for a bit. It's really interesting. Like, people are gonna claim, oh, the balls were magnetized, or there's another that this was one of the recorded options and it was just pushed live, whichever one the NHL liked best. We as fans will never know. There was media there in the building. I'm sure it would have come out through somebody that this was rigged in that regard. But we're at the point where I just wanted something to go right for the Flames, and I don't think I'm alone in this fan base in saying it. But I don't think the Leafs winning this draft lottery is going to make those voices go down at all. Yes, the final draft order for the NHL draft ends up being number 1, the Toronto Maple Leafs, number 2, the San Jose Sharks, 3, the Vancouver Canucks, 4, Chicago Blackhawks, 5, New York Rangers, 6, the Calgary Flames, 7th, Kraken, 8, Winnipeg, 9, Florida, who, if they had won, I would have been absolutely livid. Hey, you already just won the 2 of the most recent Stanley Cups. Here, have a first overall draft pick. Gary loves Florida. But then it's the Nashville Predators at 10, Blues at 11, Devils at 12, Islanders at 13, CBJ at 14, St. Louis, which was Detroit's pick, at 15, and the Washington Capitals at 16. So, this leaves us with going into that consolidated ranking that I've used so often, that I do believe was just updated by Elite Prospects today, so we'll have to see. As there will be some guys rising and falling, of course. They still have Caleb Malhotra at 13. I doubt that will be the case, as he's now viewed as the best center after his performance with the Brantford Bulldogs. Who just got one of the guys at a Shark Tank, I think is now a investor in Brantford, so we'll have to see. But yeah, that does pose the question. Are the Flames okay just waiting to see who falls to them? Because there's could be Keaton Verhoff still on the board when Craig Conroy walks up to the podium. Are they happy with a guy like Carson Carrolls and Murray Edwards and his thoughts on, hey, last time we drafted somebody out of Prince George, he got injured a whole bunch and hasn't even played a full professional season? Who knows? Is he going to see a guy that's played in Jukurit in Albert Smits and has played in the Olympics already at age 17, 18? Is that going to be the selection? Are you going to move Blake Coleman and some of your second round selections to get into position, as Tokay suggests, in drafting the Ruck twins, which has kind of been something me and Anand both talked about as something we were both definitely for? It really puts the Flames into, I'm not going to say a enviable position. It's probably the least wanted position out of anyone in the NHL. However, this also brings up the fact that there are teams ahead of the Calgary Flames that are now rumored to be testing the waters in moving down because they didn't win the first selection. That, of course, being the Sharks, looking to maybe add a more established scoring threat and moving off the second pick. Or potentially, we've heard the Blackhawks, who are 2 spots above the Flames, looking to move down, garner another couple of assets. What does that mean for the Flames? Does that mean they don't believe in a guy like Tynan Lawrence? They believe that Caleb Malhotra, another center in a position of need that has that high ceiling, low floor, that they don't want to select Carson Carrolls if that hasn't been Craig Conroy's guy the whole way through, which I very much think is a possibility. I think Craig Conroy realized that Carson Carroll's might be what the Flames need long term, and being okay being a little bit lower if you weren't getting one of the top two. These are all questions I think the Flames are asking themselves at this point. And I apologize, I have to throw a lozenge in my maw because it's as I said, summer cold. Trying to beat it off, but don't seem to be doing that very well. Steve Nash's nephew, is that Carson Carroll's? Because I totally haven't actually seen that. Because, you know, Steve Nash's brother, Martin Nash, used to be a coach for Calgary FC, now obviously coaching Vancouver FC in the Canadian Premier League. Because Toke number 1 in the YouTube chat saying that Steve Nash's nephew. Oh no, Caleb Malhotra. Interesting. I didn't know that. The link between the Nash family and the Malhotra family. Joanne Nash married to Manny. Things I didn't know. You know, I think it's kind of weird. The Nash family really good at soccer and basketball. I guess it makes sense that it's just an athletic bloodline. It'll be interesting. And I guess that kind of makes sense because it was Macklin whose dad was in baseball or basketball. Just athletic family lines, I guess, are good things. But yeah, you have to wonder if the Flames say, we want to trade up. Obviously, I don't think you trade with the Canucks. I think Canucks are going to stick at 3. And I think they're likely going to select Chase Reed, the Sioux Greyhound defender. But who knows? The Canucks could say, we need that center just as much. Select him. And then I think that'll really see where the Flames bounce out to. Is I don't think there's a lot of difference outside of those top 2 guys. I think pick 3 or 4 through probably about 10 are all at a similar ceiling floor level. So unless you're realizing that there is way too many right-handed D, guys like Keaton Verhoff, Chase Reed, and Daxon Rudolph, and not enough in positions where you need, which is skilled scoring and probably a left-handed D, that maybe you do need to jump into that 4 spot, make a deal with Chicago, and take that game changer sooner. Because I think in those 4 through 10 guys, they're all going to need a couple of years in the AHL before they do make that NHL impact. But I think Flames fans can be some of the most impatient. I think Calgary fans in general can be very impatient, not understanding rebuilds. Look at the Calgary Stampeders and how they're rebuilding, and how Vernon Adams was supposed to completely solve all the issue for the White Horse. Look at as soon as the Hitmen start to be in that fall of the cycle of junior hockey, how soon the Saddledome goes from 7 to 10,000 to 3 to 4 or worse. Is Murray Edwards concerned about that cycle? Is he concerned that if he doesn't get a star, that leading into the final season of the Saddledome, that fans are going to start walking away from this club and a new building isn't going to bring them back? I think there is a decent chance of that being the case. It's tough, but let's assume that the NHL draft wasn't rigged. Let's assume that. And assume that it was just the lottery balls falling where it is. And assume that we have to be happy with where we're at. And assume that the Flames aren't going to move up, aren't going to move down until later in that first round when the Rucks are in the range. Of course, that being late first, early second. Let's assume they're not moving off the sixth selection. Let's kind of do a bit of a fantasy draft. So let's do at least the first 16 picks. Do the first 16 that were selected by the ping pong balls. Let's look at each of these teams. Let's look at Toronto. And Toronto needs a lot. Obviously, their defensive play is and has been atrocious for a long, long time. It's been really tough for them, obviously, with the loss of Mitch Marner to produce on a consistent basis. So you have to think that it will definitely be Gavin McKenna being selected. He has that elite level ceiling, is a Canadian that they can market around. And a lot of people are saying he's number one with a bullet regardless. Should the Leafs, maybe if there had been a consideration that Keaton Verhoff had a great end of the season, could have been the case. Didn't really push his way into that category. And like, unless the issues with character in the pre-draft interviews become glaringly obvious, I think they just have to pick McKenna. And I don't think if you're the Leafs, you can pick Ivor Stenberg because, well, he is the safer of the two options. I think people like Steve Dangle, who has a lot of sway in that market, regardless. I think Sportsnet hears enough from the fans, so another Rogers property. And hey, the fact that I don't love that this matters, but it does. Gavin's Canadian, Ivor Stenberg is not. The Toronto Maple Leafs are going to pick Gavin McKenna. I know some people will say, "Oh, that how does that play with Austin Matthews?" You'll figure it out for the next 2 years, and then if Matthews walks, you still have one of the best players in the game to build your team around. So then this goes to the Sharks, and I think if McKenna goes off the board, Stenberg gets picked. If Stenberg goes off the board, McKenna gets picked number 2. It is going to be a scary, scary, scary first line for the Sharks, for the Flames, for the next decade. Because if we look at that Sharks lineup, based on the final game of the NHL season, let's bump down Igor Chernyshov and slot in Stenberg. Stenberg, Celebrini, Smith is going to be a problem for the Pacific Division, and it is going to cause me so many nights where I want to rip my head off because the Calgary Flames can't cover anybody on that line outside of Will Smith. As Toke is saying, the salary cap will protect us from San Jose in 7 years, in 5 years. Because Misa, Sherwood, Eklund, they'll come off their entry levels at a similar time. But I think if you're going to shove in guys like Barclay Goodrow, Zakopchak, Philip Kurashev, I think they're going to be able to just pull the Pittsburgh model of Our top two lines are great. We're going to find guys that have played well for the Barracuda, rotate them in for 2 years, and then they're going to sign like Teddy Bluger elsewhere. I think San Jose is going to be a problem. So then we go to the third pick overall, which is the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks need everything. The unethical tank is unethical. Where do you go? I think a lot of people, upon seeing Stenberg and McKenna go off the board, will go to Chase Reed. He'll be the replacement for the Hughes that they lost. We'll start to rebuild that back end. Now Chase Reed go play in Abbey for a few years so he stays away from the tire fire in Vancouver. I think that's probably the pick. The only other consideration is, do you just want a Canadian? So I think the same thing that haunts the Flames is kind of haunting the Vancouver fan base. The fact that the Hughes didn't want to play in Canada, so you couldn't convince them to come to Canada, so you had to kind of trade away Hughes to an American market. That could be the only way I see the University of North Dakota product going to Vancouver, because I think Chase Reed, strictly speaking, is the better player. Of course, how do you value playing in the Ontario League versus Keaton going down to the NCAA? And hey, that's possibly the other reason you pick Verhoff and you say, hey, you're not coming to Abbotsford. You're not coming to Vancouver. Go play in North Dakota for another year. Go win a national championship. Then you come up here. Is a third overall selection necessarily going to like that line of thinking and agree to it? Who knows? But Vancouver, they're years away from being years away from competing based on their roster construction. And let's assume Chicago sticks to this pick. Assume that you have to assume that the top three guys are off the board, and that let's assume Vancouver goes defenseman. Or say San Jose decides they want to go Chase Reed and Stenberg falls to Vancouver, which could happen. Chicago really, really wants Stenberg. I don't think he gets to them. I think it will likely be either Malholtra or Carson Carrolls that goes to Chicago. Of course, that needs a lot of ping pong balls and people to go certain ways. But yeah, if Stenberg falls, they snap him up and they are the happiest team in the world. If they don't, I think they probably look at Malholtra and start to go that Pittsburgh model where you have Connor Bedard as your one center, and then you have Caleb Malholtra as your Evgeny Malkin comparable. I think that's probably the way things go. The other thing that they could think of is they need to find a winner or a winger who can potentially score, and the only guy that's kind of in that region is Ethan Belshitz, the Windsor Spitfire winger. Because I think Viggo Bjork isn't a scoring threat. I think he is a very good playmaking center, even considering his size. But yeah, I think you hope and pray that Stenberg falls if you're a Blackhawks fan. But I think they will go with Belshitz if they stay in that position. I also don't expect the Chicago Blackhawks to stay there, if I'm entirely honest. I could see them trading back. And then that brings us to the New York Rangers. And I think the New York Rangers are much like the Vancouver Canucks, where they've got holes on holes on holes. So this is one where I'm really kind of thinking about things. Because I don't necessarily think that there is a perfect fit to New York. And there's lots of reasons why I think that. But also, New York is being shown to be one of the worst, if not the worst. Because it is such a question. Like, they're at a tough situation. Because I think they're just at the point where they pick the best available player. And I don't think there is a consensus on who the best available is. Do they want to take the risk on Albert Smits? Um, do they go a little bit further down the board and look at a guy like JP Holbert, who is the only American on potentially available? I think if Chase Reed falls to them, they're extremely happy. But it really is just kind of Rangers take the best available, who's at the top of their board. I think they will look, if it's an American, I think they could be one of the people looking at Albert Smits, saying, oh, we drafted an Olympian, and be able to build around that. If Carson Carrolls is available, there is a chance that he goes there. So that brings us to the Calgary Flames, and I think it is either if Caleb Malhotra falls to you, you snap up Caleb Malhotra and realize you are drafting one of the weakest positions on your team right now. You draft somebody who is potentially going to play in the NHL in his draft year. Or you go and you select your left-handed defenseman, whether that be Carson Carrolls out of Prince George, whether that be Albert Smits, who I have said I think the Calgary Flames will select for a while. I think those are kind of your two guys or three guys to look at. I don't think the Flames have any interest in drafting any of the top tier right-handed defensemen. So I think those are your three names. Outside shot that it is Vigo Bjork, if he is still on the board. Another center, an undersized player who the Calgary Flames seem to be in love with. That's the only reason I would love Caleb Malhotra, because he does bring a little bit more size that the Calgary Flames don't have outside of Adam Klapka. Let's look at the Seattle Kraken now, as they would select, and I think that's where the Keaton Verhoff slide stops if Seattle stays in the top 7. Again, I think they just need a little bit of help everywhere. Could they use a goal scorer? Yes. But I also think that they don't have a lot of goaltending. Selecting the two-way player that is Keaton Verhoff to solidify your back end works really well for Seattle. Winnipeg Jets, I really see them going in the direction of Tynan Lawrence, whose draft stock admittedly has been plummeting. But I think they just need someone who won't be afraid of living in the central Canada. I could also see them drafting one of the Finns in Olivier Sultano or Oscar Hemming out of the NCAA. Or outside shot that it's Hermanson, I think, as well. Just feel that being the play. I with Nashville, I think they're gonna pick somebody who has links to the U.S., whether that's Holbert or whether that's Oscar Hemming, who has played hockey at Boston College. Just know the ownership there and their general management style. Nashville, I think they'll just select probably best on the board, whether that be Daxon Rudolph, Albert Smits, Ryan Lynn. I think those are kind of guys on their radar. St. Louis, I don't know where St. Louis goes. Did they go Gustafson? Do they go Xavier Villeneuve of the Armada? Or are they one of the people who takes one of the Russians that's come over in Ilya Morozov or Igor Shilov? It's possible. The Devils, I could see definitely going Shilov. Um, or Juho Pilparinen, I believe it is, out of Tapara. The Islanders, I have no idea because I don't know who's going to be coaching that squad or what the coach of that squad wants. I could see them going Adam Novotny out of the Peterborough Petes. Um, St. Louis, again, who knows? I think they're one of the teams that could package both of these two early picks to go get that Chicago draft pick. But assuming, as we said, they don't trade down, I think they go Matthias Preston out of Spokane, one of those guys who could play any position on a forward line. And then the Caps, I think maybe if they know that Alex Ovechkin is playing for one last year, they could go Igor Shilov or Ilya Morozov. The other one I think it could be is Nikita Kelfov, the American who is playing in SAG. That gets us through the top 16 in the NHL draft. It's just so tough. Do the Flames have the assets to get either that Chicago or that San Jose pick? I don't think so. And I think if it were me in Craig Conroy's shoes rather, the only pick I want is that the Flames can get up into that number 2 pick. And with the amount of assets that would require, probably being a position player, a guy from the farm, and that 6 overall, or that 6 overall, the Vegas Golden Knights first, and a position player. That's a lot to give up, especially if your plan is to try and make a serious run at getting both of the Ruck twins. I think moving up eliminates that as a possibility, and I don't think for the Calgary Flames, where we saw what the Wranglers were this year, I don't think that's where you can be. I think you need to kind of take this as let's pick as many players as we can. Let's go and get the Ruck twins, get whoever we get at 6th. Hopefully it's Carson Carroll's. I think that's a brilliant pick for the Flames to have 2 amazing pairings of young defensemen to build your future around. Imagine if you still had Ilya Solovyov too to be that 3rd pairing guy. Just saying, as it's announced today that the guy that caused the Flames to lose Ilya Solovyov, Daniil Miramanov, will be returning to Russia. It's tough. As I'd actually, out of the options of trade up, trade down, or stay pat, I'd actually prefer the Flames to trade down, get some more assets, get some more lottery picks, because the Flames have done really well at selecting later into drafts and allowing these guys to develop, recognizing the late bloomers. And we also have to recognize the Calgary Flames are one of the few teams that don't have a lot of open roster spots for next year. Like, we already have a lot of our spots filled. Like, where we just simply don't have availability to bring in more guys. Like, it's tough where this Calgary Flames squad has put themselves. But again, we are going to have to see where management and ownership of this team sees the Flames in the next few years. Because you got to remember, in 2 years, the Calgary Flames are opening their new stadium. You want to open that, and hey, let's see if the Calgary Flames this year can finish in the bottom two and get another shot. Whether that is going to be Landon Dupont, you have the best 3 right-handed defensemen in the league for the next 10 years, or any of the other guys in that 2027 draft, because this isn't going to be a one-and-done rebuild for the Calgary Flames. And I think a lot of people have kind of recognized that. Because I think if we look 2027, 2028, the Flames are still bad. So remember, the San Jose Sharks, while they took a massive step forward, they needed 3 to 4 years of top overall draft picks. So whether that's the Calgary Flames getting into that bottom portion of the draft, selecting Jacob Jacobson or Landon Dupont, Alexis Joseph, I know a lot of people are saying he's been unreal. Carter Mayer and Sammy Nelson, 2 U.S. National Development Program players. Or Dima Zelkin out of SAG. Like, there is lots of guys, not in this draft, but in drafts in the future, that the Flames should be looking at. Because this isn't going to be a one and done. The Flames are going to be bad for a few years, folks. As awful it is to say that, it being a Calgary Flames fan. And if they stick at the bottom for 3 years, or for the next 2 years, and bottom out and draft Maddox Schultz, I'm starting to be okay with that and recognizing that I just want this team to be good at some point. And to see a Stanley Cup in my lifetime. I'm sorry to cut it here, folks, but my voice is starting to really, really begin to give out. So I am going to call it here. Thank you to everyone who showed up, whether you were in YouTube chat, whether you were watching silently on Twitch. It's been a fun week. Hopefully this weekend I know I'm going out for Hot Pot today with my partner. As I said, it's his birthday today. So going out with some friends and family to go celebrate that. Happy Mother's Day to everyone this weekend, unless you're watching from Europe, in which case I know their Mother's Day is different. Once again, thank you so much. We'll be back on Monday. I'm trying to get a guest to talk Western Canadian baseball next Monday. We'll see if I can get that. Was the draft rigged? At the end of the day, I think so. Your biggest Canadian market, who has their star threaten to leave, magically has the lottery balls jump in their direction. You know, hard to tell. But remember, sports are fun. Doing the show is fun. I will see you on Monday. Same start time, same channel. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you on Monday.